Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 18th, 2021. How am I doing? Okay, it's a good question. I'm a little exhausted. I'm a little fatigued. I don't know. I'm going to blame it on the vaccine, which I think I have an opportunity to do at some point later in the afternoon. I guess this is the regular follow-up routine, but they bother me every day at about the same time that I finally registered following my first shot. I don't know if I really knew what I was getting into. They check in with me every day and ask me how I'm doing, and essentially whether or not I blame it on the vaccine. I think it's really up to them to decide whether I blame it on the vaccine. But I've been fine, and all good. Yesterday was a long car trip. Yesterday was down to the college and back to pick up son number one for his shortened spring break. I guess that's the COVID protocol this year, is they decided we'll give him a spring break, provided the numbers look pretty good, and I guess they're looking okay these days, and so they get a Thursday and Friday plus weekend off. So it's a short little thing, I guess, designed so that it's not long enough that anybody is tempted to run away to a COVID hotspot like, I don't know, Florida, or in this case, Brazil. I don't think anybody ever run down to Brazil for spring break before, but you never know. Who knows? I'm sure somewhere someone's going to college with kids who have access to private jets, and maybe they're going. But anyway, home for a couple of days, right back down again on Sunday, so full day in the car. But what a convenient schedule we have here on KITM, where we can bring you a live show in the morning, wrap things up, put out the podcast, run out the door, and head down for a pickup like this one. So big laundry day today. I know you're all excited about that. Our laundry room is not inside the broadcast studio, so we're in pretty good shape in terms of background noise. We just have the regular background noise of a full house of people who aren't allowed to go anywhere because coronavirus pandemic, but mostly still asleep. So that's pretty good. A lot of coronavirus news for me this morning. My morning reading dominated by news of a fantastic new variant circulating in Brazil with all kinds of resistance to vaccines and faster transmission and higher death rates and all the things that you didn't want to have happen. The whole idea was to get everybody vaccinated before any of that stuff popped up, but it has. So we move forward with that on our plate, and, well, I guess we should get right to it. Bill has sent us a morning tweet quoting, I guess, yesterday's tweet for yesterday's show, but posing a very serious question for all of us. We'll see if Greg can answer it. We are live now, of course, with the new morning show, and we mentioned yesterday that Republicans, like the cicadas, and there's the answer, I guess, return at regular intervals with their screeching. Every 30 years or so, they predict total economic doom. That was the theme of yesterday's second half of yesterday's show. So today's topic is, how do you pronounce cicadas? And I guess there's your answer. Is there a question about that? Do people not know how that's pronounced? Or is it just we know how to pronounce it because they swarm us every couple of years and you never forget it? Good morning, Greg. Are you going to be covered with cicadas this year, or are they not in the Connecticut brood this area?
I don't know. I worry about gypsy moths.
I
haven't seen them yet, but it's that time of year. I don't see a lot of cocoons, and so hopefully that's not the case. It's interesting because spring is definitely coming. I see the yellow finches starting to actually get yellow instead of their winter green. So they're not finished yet. A lot of the birds are like half yellow, half green.
Winter green birds.
It's fun. It's fun to watch them at the feeder. One of the COVID things is like you get to be bird watchers, so you can watch the little dinosaurs eat you out of house and home because they're little pigs on wings.
Yes, well, as they say, nature is healing.
Yes,
I think they start saying that, though. Yeah,
but it is a case where I get to watch the cardinals and the other birds that I really like to see. So absolutely worth it. So I think what you have to do is start forgetting that these are household members in the house because of COVID and start thinking of them as your producers.
Yes, well, I do
Because
sometimes.
I noted the other day, whenever you had questions about stuff, they would chime in with the answer,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah, it's perfect. Right, so anytime, well, it's not any time that I just snap my fingers, but occasionally they hear the questions and provide
I know
the
the answers, right.
Yeah.
So it's great when they offer it. They should continue to do that. Of course, they have to be awake for it, and that's,
Right.
A little iffy
Change the
these
time of
days,
the
especially
show.
with, leaden skies and gloomy days like today. But that's all good. There's a lot I have to talk about, but being a thorough professional, I'm not really sure what I'm going to say. That's the way the
Right.
show goes, right?
Yeah.
So let me throw in something I had ready for yesterday but didn't get to.
Okay.
And that is
Yes,
what's going
please.
on with the AstraZeneca vaccine.
What is going on with that? I
Not
do wanna
much. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is one of the primary vehicles that Europe is counting on.
know. Yes.
But it was its administration was halted across much of Europe, including France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and I think some of the Scandinavian countries as well.
Much of Europe. Yeah.
And the reason is that people had reported blood clots. The thing is,
Yeah.
the
So
prevalence of blood clots from the vaccine or associated with the vaccine was actually less than the general public. So that doesn't merit changing your view of what to do. But they did it anyway for, precautionary reasons.
Okay.
Which isn't science, but, that's
right.
politics. So
Yeah,
that's
okay.
one of the things
You
you,
don't
have to
wanna
do.
be-
There's already 17 million people who have gotten the vaccine in the EU and UK.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And the number experiencing the symptoms is lower than would be expected in the general population. So earlier this week, there was a board, safety board, European Medicine Agency and WHO. They were going to convene and talk about it. I'm not totally sure where they're at this particular point in time. But one of the things that makes it politically of note here is that AstraZeneca has not been approved in the United States, but we are sitting on, 100 million doses or so. So if we're not going to use them, then why don't we send them elsewhere? Use soft power,
yes.
gain prestige. And the answer is, well, if everybody here isn't vaccinated, how can you be sending vaccines away? But I don't want them. But you shouldn't send them away anyway because that doesn't look good. So, the Biden administration's already said they're considering it. They may do Canada and Mexico first, cover North America, and then go on from there, which is a way of saying, we're definitely going to do this. We're just thinking about the best political way to say that we're doing this. And it is a good thing that they do because there's no reason that the rest of the world shouldn't be vaccinated. And if we have a vaccine we're not going to use,
Well, right.
and there's others that are coming on the pipeline. And so the fact of the matter is, like it or not, we're going to wind up with a glut of vaccine. We're going to have more vaccine than people's arms, and including both arms. So, the question is, what do you do with it? And that's the future. And it's important to start thinking about how those things go. So
Put it next to the
message
Tamiflu.
here is, first of all, AstraZeneca is being very precautionary and temporarily stopping use of the vaccine, which will probably continue. And I have to add, a lot of the European countries are really not doing this well, and a lot of their vaccine rolls out are pretty bollocksed up, even compared to the United States. So
That's sad.
to try to derail their main vaccine is bad. And I think that they'll get around that relatively quickly. Hopefully, if they take their time and say, we looked at it, it'll help to, end the doubts about it. But you know how these things grow. Oh, the vaccine they had to stop. Well, yeah, they looked at it and there was no problem. Yeah, but they had to stop it, so I'm not doing it. So disinformation, misinformation is always out there. So it's a difficult thing. It's not our problem. It's their problem. But what to do with our vaccines is our problem, and I just thought I would bring that up before I forgot to mention it.
Yeah, all right. Well, it was a big story, and I got about half of it, but so things are not going all that well there. And in Central Europe, I noticed, I'm still, tracking day to day how countries are doing. In Western Europe, like the United States, I would say largely I don't know if we can say yet you've got a handle on things here, but they've managed to slow their growth numbers considerably. But
they're having waves
now.
Europe, Germany's in the middle of another wave. And
yeah,
so, again,
yeah.
there's some precautionary tales here about opening up too soon. We're not done, variants, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and so now this morning I awake to the news that Brazil has some particularly difficult to deal with variant of its own, and not much in the way of health infrastructure for dealing with it. And I guess the question is, does it break out of Brazil and spread around the world? And apparently not particularly disturbed by the fact that some people are vaccinated either.
The Brazilian problem right now, the acute problem, is that their ICUs are 90% full or more, and their medical system is on verge of collapsing. It's the exact same thing we tried to prevent when we had our slowdown that people call lockdown that never really was, when we, at the very beginning of last year, tried to preserve our health system, which we did. So that was a success. And, people say, well, lockdowns don't work. Well, actually, they do. We didn't turn into Italy or Brazil.
No.
And we didn't even completely lock down. So, masks don't work. Well, they do, because we didn't turn into Italy or Brazil.
Right.
Yeah, well, the vaccines don't work. Yeah, they do, because we didn't turn into Italy and Brazil. Mm-hmm. So, things that we did actually worked. And so, again, this is part of the large debate, how much of the success that the Trump administration started, because he himself was useless, how much help are we getting now from what they did, and how much is what Biden did? And the answer is yes, as in most things. And that's an interesting segue into the next part of what I wanted to talk about, which is, how do you take credit for an economic recovery?
Win the presidential election.
Well, if you're Trump, you win the presidential election and take credit for everything Obama did.
Sure, why not?
And if you're Biden, you win a presidential election and take credit for everything that Biden did.
Sure.
So, it's, when the Democrats are trying to help things and the Republicans are trying to get in the way, it's relatively easy. Mm-hmm. But in some ways, it's sort of a mirror image of what happened in 2016. This is a piece from Michael Grunwald in Politico magazine, which I thought was pretty interesting. By the way, Politico magazine tends to have better stories than Politico, gossip column.
Yeah. Okay.
The GOP's political nightmare running against a recovery. The Democrats just passed a massive spending bill with no GOP support. Why are Republicans talking about Dr. Seuss and the border?
That's not a new book either.
Right. President Barack Obama's 2009 stimulus bill may have helped avoid a second Great Depression, but it was a political fiasco. As then Congressman Barney Frank liked to say, things would have sucked even worse without us, was an unappealing message for a Democratic bumper sticker.
Still,
I like Barney Frank. I really miss him. Yeah. Republicans relentlessly mocked the $800 billion stimulus as a wasteful pork fest, while Democrats tried fervently to change the subject, which was an incredible messaging mistake. Own what you did and be proud of it, and that's what Biden is doing now. Okay. So 12 years later, the politics of stimulus has flipped, says Grunwald. Democrats are relentlessly hyping Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill, while Republicans are trying to change the subject. Mm-hmm. Mr. Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, Mexican border. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, arguably the shrewdest Republican strategist in Washington, has started floating a half-hearted anti-stimulus message that the coming recovery would have happened anyway.
Okay.
Right? As a message, this amounts to things would have been just as great without it, and even less appealing bumper sticker than Barney Frank's.
Possibly true.
Right? So it may be an overstated political cliche if you're explaining you're losing, but you're almost certainly losing if you're explaining ahead of time why the economic boom you're expecting on your opponent's watch shouldn't be attributed to your opponent. Mm-hmm. So that's the situation that we're in now. We're going to see some fairly amazing economic numbers, and I imagine for the next few years, people will look around and say, this is pretty good, says American Enterprise Institute fellow James Pethakokis.
I don't know. Well, I didn't get to that part. Oh, there it is, yeah. Wow, good question.
A conservative economist who believes the Biden stimulus is somewhat excessive. I'm sure Republicans will try to spin this, and I have long-term concerns, but the reality of a crazy strong expansion is going to be tough to spin away.
Okay.
Now, Republicans learned how to say no But, it worked in 2009 when the economy was still struggling, but I don't see how it works if we get a mammoth job creation number, says Republican strategist Tony Fratto, a former assistant Treasury Secretary in the Bush administration. Maybe you could say the economy is running too hot, but I don't think the Biden bill was too effective. It's going to sell very well.
Yeah, well,
and then he talks about what's changed since then. We all sort of know that. But I think the overriding message there is pretty important. Yes. And at the same time, Tom Edsall, for somebody who didn't know what they were going to be saying, apparently there's a lot to talk about
organized.
Here. Tom Edsall, Biden wants no part of the culture war the GOP loves. The generosity of his $1.9 trillion relief bill has the added benefit of shifting attention where he wants it.
Okay.
So two sides of this coin. The GOP absolutely positively doesn't want to talk about the relief bill. And nobody calls it a relief bill. People pretty much have stopped calling it stimulus, which was pretty good messaging on the part of the Democrats for those who complain about messaging. But the flip side of that coin is the GOP really, 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 really wants to talk about culture wars. They love talking about that. They have nothing else.
That's
what pulls them together. That's what unites the party. They want to talk about that. Biden isn't having any part of it. Okay. So you won't find Mr. Potato Head, I think, at the next, State of the Union or whatever. He doesn't give a State of the Union the first time, but whatever his address to Congress is.
Joint session of Congress. I don't know what they needed a name for it so that people remember that this.
Right, people consider it the State of the Union, but actually the first one is not a State of the Union, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and one of those weird peculiarities we discovered along the way and mention every couple of years. Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So according to a rundown by the Center for American Progress of the bill's exceptionally generous provisions, the bill will cut child poverty in half, and a middle-income family of 4 with one child under age 6 and one child age 6 or above will receive $8,200 at minimum.
Okay, that's confusing sounding, but it's
decisive majority of voters at 28% have a positive opinion of the bill.
All right.
And another example, and I have more on that with some fresh polling. Another example from the center's calculations: a family of 4, same age breakdown, earning $75,000 and spending $5,000 on childcare will receive $8,200 plus $1,500 child independent tax credit.
Okay.
Total benefit $9,700. It's getting $10,000 a year for a family in that particular situation. It's pretty darn good.
It is pretty good. By the way, my son, the economist, heard about the stimulus thing and on the way home asked, did we get stimulus checks? Because he figured on saying, I understand there was a $1,400 child benefit, and I would like to have that, please. Wow. No, that's supposed to be for the people who are paying for all of the things you're eating and wearing.
Yeah, it goes to the people who pay for the children, not the children.
He said he thought this was like, the kids get $1,400. This is awesome.
This is great.
You're not paying enough attention in class.
This is wonderful.
They
also get Legos. It's right there in the bill,
Right. Oh,
it says Thomas the Tank
danger
Engine
of giving kids
train sets made out of real wood. I mean, it's all there. Mm-hmm. That's what the Republicans were fighting. It's pretty stupid. So taking their cues from a new president who steadfastly refuses to engage with or react to cultural provocations, Democratic office holders have mostly kept their heads down and focused on passing legislation. The week's Damon Linker wrote in, will the GOP's culture war gambit blow up in its face? That raises the possibility, as Linker said, that while Republicans are busy trying to bait Democrats in culture issues, these Democrats end up winning public opinion in a big way by refusing to play along, changing the subject, and actually making the lives of most Americans concretely better.
Okay.
Right? Stanley Feldman, a political scientist at Stony Brook University. If you ever read a Tom Edsall column, what he does is he gets little snippets from all these experts and sort of ties them together, which is kind of fun. Biden understands that it's to the Democrats' advantage to lower the volume on the culture wars. The COVID rescue bill is a clear attempt to change political discourse back to economic issues and to provide broad-based, tangible assistance to a large part of the public. Biden signs executive orders on gender, but there's little discussion of this. Okay. So Stan Greenberg agrees, and it's fantastic for Democrats, but he does say you're going to have to gain control of immigration. The border matters. What's interesting about the border issue is that their administration has actually put out some fairly concrete things. This is what's happening. This is why we're in this situation. It's a leftover of what Trump did. No, it's not because we changed policy. Here's what we plan to do about it, and all that stuff. Kevin McCarthy goes to the border, and the reporters who were down there noted he blasted the Democrats on their policy, but had none of his own. And that was in almost every
what do you know?
story.
Yeah, it's healthcare over again.
Right, exactly.
Repeal and replace with nothing.
Right. Celinda Lake, president of Lake Research Partners, a Democratic firm, is less worried about the ability of Republicans to once again raise immigration as a wedge issue.
Okay.
It's way down on voters' concerns. With COVID and the economy, voters don't think immigration is a serious concern. In the case of the surge of immigrants seeking entry on the border with Mexico, this isn't a crisis. This is a problem that's emerged because of mismanagement, uniquely flawed policies under Trump. What's needed is a roadmap to citizenship and reasonable, workable policies with leadership. And because of this, the most important strategy for Democrats is to keep focus on vaccines, jobs, wages, and small businesses. As a matter of fact, I think the House is going to be voting on the Dreamer part of that, as well as some immigration reform, probably passed. Then it gets to the Senate, and it'll be one of those bills that you have to discuss in terms of the filibuster. So that's where that stands. So the Democrats are definitely taking that strategy. So the next question is, well, how is it working? So John Anzalone put some Navigator research data out this morning, which is absolutely fascinating. And this has to do with the pandemic and the vaccines and how that's going. And I gave you a picture of that graph, and they asked, where do you think we're at? The worst is yet to come, or the worst is over, or don't know.
Oh, right, yeah.
And since Biden was elected, and particularly on February 15th, the two lines cross.
Yeah.
And now the worst is yet to come has gone from 60 to 23. The worst is over has gone from 25 to 54.
Yeah.
So people really think that Biden has a handle on this.
I guess so.
Over the past 2 months.
Even the worst is yet to come is down so low it's tied with don't know.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
All right, well. But that's a pretty good, it's a crossing of the streams. You're not supposed to cross the streams, but they've done it here.
Right. Oh, no. Just like the Ghostbusters. But, this will be, in addition to these other polls, a new Morning Consult political tracking poll, which is from yesterday, is the second survey after RMG Research, Republican-leaning firm, to find Biden receiving an approval rating bounce post-passage of the COVID relief.
Aha.
Approval, disapprove. Okay. Morning Consult, March 8th, 59.37. March 15th, 62.34. RMG Research, and this is approval rating.
Yes.
Overall, RMG Research, March 6th, remember, Republican-leaning firm, March 6th, 53.39, March 13th, 57.37.
All right.
Both polls find the disapproval for Biden in the 34 to 37 range as of now.
Okay, I can see it, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that 34 to 37, that's about where Trump approval belonged. Sometimes it's snuck into the 40s.
True.
But, when we were looking at it throughout the 4 years, it hit 35 in this Quinnipiac poll or this Gallup poll or whatever. That's about where it belongs. You're always going to have a third of the country that's just nuts. Okay?
Yes. 23%
supported Nixon when he had to resign instead of being impeached. So the floor is always like 23, 25, and then you have another 10% partisans that say, well, I hate him, but he's our guy.
Right.
The way Democrats do with Andrew Cuomo.
They're willing to show up. Right. I guess they had abandoned ship on Nixon, but there was still 23% who actually genuinely thought he was good.
Not only was he good, but he should keep doing whatever he's doing.
Keep it up.
Keep it up, right? So 34 to 37% disapproval is actually pretty good, and you can break that down even more. Morning Consult poll, do you support or oppose the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package? Not Biden's approval, but the package itself.
Right. Sure.
Registered voters, 72%, support, 20% oppose. Biden voters, 93% support, 3% oppose. Who are those 3%? They probably live in Florida.
Yeah.
In the panhandle. Trump voters, 41, 51. So you get half of Trump voters.
Yeah.
Democrats, 94 to 2. GOP, 44 to 47. You get half of the GOP. Independents, 69-19. Liberals, 95-2. Moderates, 81-14. Even conservatives split 47-46. This bill is popular.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea, as we were talking about at the beginning of this segment, that if you're going to run, you run on this, and you do it now, and you make sure everybody knows, and you don't run away from it, and you don't try to change the subject. Democrats have gotten that, and that's why it's so annoying because you see what Democrats are doing on the one hand, and you see the results in these polls on the other hand, and then you listen. Oh, well, the Democrats never have any good messaging. Oh, they always blow everything. Oh, they can screw up. Oh, this and that.
Well,
look
sure.
What's happening around you.
That is true.
Stop complaining. Open your eyes. Smell the coffee.
Oh, yeah. Well, why did they poll? How much more would you like it if the checks had been $2,000 instead of $1,400?
Funny thing, I haven't seen that specific poll, but it doesn't seem to matter.
I guess not. I mean, I guess a few people would say, I guess I'd like that more, but they probably already said they liked it.
Ask your son, the economist,
Gotcha.
if you were getting a child bonus, would he care whether it was $1,400 or $2,000?
Well,
the answer is you're getting nothing.
Yeah, that's
you
why
you get nothing.
I didn't catch it. My son is
Willy
the 3%.
Willy Wonka should explain to your son why you get nothing.
Right. Oh, I have that. I got. That's not much of an explanation. It's just that's the answer. But I think he's the 3% you couldn't figure out. The 3% of Democrats who opposed the bill, they're the ones saying, "Well, I didn't get anything."
Right. And now another poll. This one is from YouGov Economist. Approved, disapproved last week 50-40 plus 10. This week 53-37 plus 16. So the passage of the bill has helped Biden. Nobody's complaining except on Twitter about it being 1,400 instead of 2,000. We said at the time that's one of the dumbest arguments I've ever seen. It turns out it was one of the dumbest arguments we've ever seen.
Okay. Well, okay.
He said 2,000, yeah, because you got 600. Now he's giving you 1,400. That adds up to 2,000. Next question. Yes, but it's not 2,000 yet, but people are happy with it. Next
but you
question.
said, yeah, I mean, I guess essentially that's it in the end. And it's okay. That's the process of getting used to what actually happens. Oh, okay. Well, now we're on to that. That's true. He should give a press conference, but he should do it in Dr. Seuss rhyme, just to show that we do support Dr. Seuss. Something like that. I guess that's apparently necessary to do. All right, we'll take a short break, and then we'll be right back. And I wish I had a rhyme for that rhymed with back, but I don't. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time now for us to decide what our second segment is going to be. If you have no ideas, if you would like to spend it filling out a basketball bracket, we could do that.
Yeah, or if you have some idea what I should say, send it in now, because I'm making it up as I go along. Do not try this at home. We're professionals. Yes. So some little lightning round stuff, just because I don't want to forget. Did we do Bob Menendez calling Ron Johnson's remarks about Black Lives Matter and the January 6th insurrection racist on the Senate floor, which is a breach of protocol? And when you fall so low that Russian Ron has to be called out by a ethically challenged Bob Menendez, and he looks good and Ron Johnson looks bad, you're in a bad place.
No, we didn't. Go ahead.
Well, that's it. Oh. So also on lightning round here, a nice story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about the Fulton DA's comfort with racketeering law.
Yes.
She is the one that's investigating Donald Trump for calling Raffensperger and the people who work for him, putting pressure to change the votes, which is a felony in Georgia.
Yeah. And the way that headline stacks up in Twitter I did a double take of that one. The Fulton DA up top and then racketeering right underneath it made me think that, they're using my favorite word, which I can't usually use on the air for what Trump is, but the F word, effateering. It's like, really? Who's using that? Oh, I see. Fulton racketeering.
Well, I got to look at the sub-headline here because I don't fully understand it. Georgia version of RICO statute used successfully against gangs and teachers.
Wow. Teachers?
Teachers.
Well, that would, you know what? I wonder. I'll have to read into it. I wonder if that's like, Republican prosecutors in Georgia prosecuting
In
teachers
2014,
unions.
a tough-minded Fulton County assistant DA used RICO to secure 11 convictions and 21 guilty pleas from teachers and administrators implicated in the Atlanta public school cheating scandal.
Okay. I don't think
That
I
same
remember
prosecutor,
that scandal.
Fannie Willis, now the newly elected district attorney, has indicated she may use RICO again as she investigates allegations of election fraud against former President Donald Trump.
So my guess is
It's
wrong.
also been used successfully against street gangs, an assisted suicide network, and a former DeKalb County sheriff who assassinated his political rival.
That sounds like a bad
Politics
one.
are tough in Georgia.
Yeah, I didn't realize how rough and tumble it was. The last one sounds like important. I don't remember the cheating scandal, but I guess they were cheating on standardized testing in
Yeah, I guess something
Georgia?
like that. I vaguely, in the back of my mind, remember that, but I'm not sure. But anyway, so they have some experience with RICO, and let's see how they put it to use there.
Yes.
Now, another
check on that
legal
pronunciation.
side of things, which is legal political. Remember the Republican attorneys general?
No. We still have some.
Yeah, useless group that tend to support insurrection. Those guys.
Right.
Here's a story from the Washington Post. The Republican attorneys general threatened key element to the $1.9 trillion stimulus. The GOP officials, now this isn't going to hold up the stimulus, but it's an interesting point that they bring up here. The GOP officials are asking the Biden administration to clarify a $350 billion program. It's $350 billion, not $350, to help cities, counties, and states in financial need. Why? Because part of the provision is you can't use it to lower taxes. You have to pay for stuff and help your people. And they're challenging the legality of that. How dare you say we can't lower taxes?
Take federal money and use it to lower state taxes. Yeah. All right. Okay. Is that in this queue here? I don't see that one. Is that
no, but it's going to be in a moment.
Okay.
It's sort of an interesting concept. And again, for those of us old enough to remember the tobacco settlement that went to a lot of states who then used it to lower taxes rather than help people quit smoking, which is what it was intended for.
Right.
That's why that provision is in there. Because the Democrats know that if you give Republicans money, they'll cut their own taxes and do nothing else with it. Mm-hmm. So there's strings attached. I hate when the government just throws money around. Well, it's not, actually. It's telling you what to do. Well, I hate when they tell us what to do. Well, you hate everything because you're haters, right? So we'll see what you do with this.
Yeah, I did catch wind of that suit that some 21, I think I saw yesterday. I think maybe it was the Justice had picked up on that on yesterday's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy was in his roundup. So, yeah, but I forgot to get back to that one. That's a good catch.
Right. So while that's happening, again, a real-world study. This is from the National Bureau of Economic Research. They have a paper out, The Effects of Child Tax Benefits on Poverty and Labor Supply, Evidence from the Canada Child Benefit and Universal Child Care Benefit. We may have covered it briefly on the show. I can't remember because I had it sitting there for a while. And I'm old and I don't remember what I did yesterday. But here's the nut graph here. We investigate whether child tax benefits reduce child poverty and labor force participation among single mothers within the context of the 2015 expansion of the Canadian Universal Child Care Benefit and the 2016 introduction of the Canada Child Benefit. We can't do these things in the United States yet, so we thought we would have Canada run this experiment for us, the 50 states plus Canada laboratory, We compare single mothers to single childless women as single mothers have historically had the highest poverty rate, and our analysis indicates both reforms reduce child poverty, although the Canada Child Benefit had the greater effect. We find no evidence of a labor supply response to either of the program reforms or either the extensive or intensive margins. And that just goes along with our friend Boswood giving us information that if you raise the minimum wage, it really doesn't have that much of an effect on the labor force. You're not going to lose jobs. That was old thinking, Milton Friedman thinking, and newer data says maybe that's not the case.
Yeah,
so that's,
big changes.
I'll throw it all in the mix.
Okay.
Fact of the matter is what Biden's doing is not only popular, but it looks like it's going to work fairly well. Now, to follow up on another thing we were talking about, this is Zainab Tufekci talking about the vaccine issue and sending it overseas.
Oh, okay.
She says it's a jarring shift from shortages, but it's reality. Just Pfizer and Moderna are on track for 600 million doses by July. J&J, 10 plus million per month. We have 100 million Novavax in the pipeline.
What's
and
that?
The U.S. only has 260 million vaccine-eligible people, although they're now starting to do studies on children 6 months to 12 years. So the vaccine-eligible population should grow. There's no reason why children can't be vaccinated. We just didn't do them first because they weren't getting as sick. Plus, you always have to do children separately. So that's coming as well. Remember, she says, how upset we got when we heard a few doses here and there were being wasted. Yes. The U.S. has at least 30, likely 60 million already manufactured doses of vaccines that can't be used here because there's no approval and will not be approved in time. And we can send them out today.
Yes.
Most likely holdup here is the political perception. I estimated it as 100 million, but she's estimating at 60. But it's a lot of vaccine that Europe could use. The administration doesn't. Oh, by the way, Mexico has already asked for AstraZeneca stuff, and so that's why Biden is looking at it. They've asked for help, and we're looking to see if we can help them.
Throw it over
the administration doesn't want to be seen as sending vaccines while shortages are working their way through, but we can do the math here and give political support to the smart, humane path.
Okay.
Soon enough, we'll be discussing giving away more of our excess because our pipeline truly exceeds our population by hundreds of millions of doses. But we could do that next month. There are doses needed now that we won't be using, and that's why AstraZeneca giveaway makes sense.
It does. Send a free Tamiflu with it.
Right.
As well.
And so Zainab is saying, look, we all know they're going to release the vaccines. Why don't you do it now and actually help people?
I would like to know why the answer, or what the answer is. Like, why not do it now? I just want to know what the logistics of it are. Just, well, yeah. I mean, people will be pushing for this, and I guess we ought to be. If it's not going to be used, and I guess that we had some question earlier when we were discussing it. Ricky was asking about why were we stockpiling it if we hadn't approved it? But I guess at that point we were just saying
we were expecting
approval,
and we didn't know what everything else was going to,
stockpiled it and then said so that if they did approve it, we could just push it out the door. But then they didn't. Okay, but somebody else did, so give it to them. I guess.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. But you have to come and pick it up.
Yeah, that's the thing. Call Uber.
Right, yeah, Uber, but for delivering vaccine.
Overseas.
Put it on a drone and just fly it around.
What kind of car am I supposed to use?
Something we could do.
And if I go overseas, do I get paid in American dollars? Or, how does that? What kind of tip?
Well, it's all free or something like that. I don't know. I guess.
Does it come with benefits?
I don't know.
A lot of questions to be answered here.
So Mexico uses AstraZeneca too. So it's not even. We should.
The rest of the world does. It's a fine vaccine, and so it's one of these any port in a storm kind of things.
I guess so. I did see. It reminds me now that story, combined with the story of the Republican attorneys general suing. I guess the Republicans are also gearing up for a suit to try to force the Biden administration to finish the Trump wall, which is kind of an astounding approach to lawsuits in general. But I guess they just
that's part of the culture war that Biden is trying to avoid.
I guess so. I don't even know what their argument is. I think that it might be that
their argument is that Mexicans are dirty and they bring disease, and so you should worry about the fact that there's some sort of caravan forming on the border.
Yes, they are trying to go back to that one too, and I did. Yeah, that's right. That reminded me as you were reading and discussing immigration as an issue and how it had mostly disappeared, and Republicans had been unsuccessful trying to revive it, and people were much more worried about the pandemic. They have tried to combine the two. They figure the pandemic is a popular worry, and if immigration isn't, what we'll do is tell everybody the immigrants are coming to this country with coronavirus, and they're going to infect us all. But it doesn't work because they just spent a year saying the coronavirus was a fake and a hoax, and now it's real because Mexicans have it.
Well, but there's your angle. There's your in.
Yeah, I mean, that's what would
fix it. You're saying Mexicans have coronavirus? No problem. We'll send them all our AstraZeneca vaccine, and we'll solve the problem where it starts.
I guess that, yeah.
Thank you so much for that suggestion. I'm sure Republicans will vote for that 100%.
Right, and of course, well, the point isn't that we
don't like
disease, it's that we don't like Mexicans.
We were going to do it anyway, but now that you've given us a reason to say that you asked for it, then fine. You better vote for it, and if you don't, we'll just say you're a bunch of cowards and hypocrites.
That's how I think. That's a great suggestion. That's how we should approach it. And Len, they'll tell us about potato heads and Dr. Seuss, I guess. But
Right. So I'm going to end my segment today early because, I didn't have that much, and I was making it up as it went along. And this is from Timothy Caulfield in the Globe and Mail. You don't have to subscribe to read it. You just have to register the paper for free. It's called COVID-19 Science and the Uncertainty Dance. He's a very good writer. And he says, COVID public health policies have been with us for over a year. So has uncertainty. And I'll have a comment on that in a moment, but why don't I just make it now? See, you got to read that with the idea that politicians seize on uncertainty to attack their opponents.
Okay.
So as long as you have uncertainty, you have an opening for one side or the other to attack the opponent. What do you mean you don't know?
Yeah.
What? It's day 2 of the pandemic and you don't have exact knowledge of what to do? You scientists are idiots.
Rob, what have you been in school this whole time for if you don't know what to do?
New. We just discovered this.
All right.
And we're the ones telling you what's going on because we have the science. Yeah, but you don't know everything. So I
Make your own vaccines then.
Right, so that's how it goes.
Bleach.
COVID public health policies have been with us for a year, so is uncertainty. We've all lived through 12 months of and this has added to the public's frustration, fatigue, and stress. In the early weeks and months of the pandemic, there was uncertainty about mass and asymptomatic spread. There was uncertainty about if and when we'd get a vaccine. There was uncertainty about what type of public health policies work best, what were needed. And we've all had to tolerate a lot of ambiguity. And as the vaccines roll out, we're being asked to tolerate even more. When will I get a vaccine? Which one will I get? What about the variants? Right. Well, luckily, you have this show where we could talk about all those things so you have some idea of what's going on. For public health communications to be effective, and I like this story because that's like my thing, public health communications, the public must have confidence in the message, and unfortunately for some, that confidence isn't there. A recent study from the University of Calgary explored pandemic communication and found, not surprisingly, that participants felt that public health messaging to date has been conflicting and at times unclear. The perception's understandable. An atmosphere of seemingly relentless uncertainty and confusion has been created by a combination of scientific reality, media practice, some less than ideal communication from policymakers, and the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories. And the science surrounding COVID was, and for some topics continues to be, highly uncertain. Like, will the vaccines work on the variant, for example? Why don't you know that? You're a scientist. You're supposed to know everything. Now I don't trust you. While a growing body of evidence has emerged around the most contested issues, value of masks, physical distancing, early in the pandemic, there wasn't much that was unequivocal, and the science evolved. And as you would hope with any evidence-informed approach, the resulting science advice and recommendation evolved too. But for some, shifting policies, even if appropriate, just added a sense, rightly or not, of chaos. Because if you're an authoritarian personality, you want to be told what to do in no uncertain terms and just do it right or wrong. That's what I just added that, but that's what people wanted, and you're not getting it, and that's why 35% are always going to hate Biden.
Okay. He's not telling them what to do?
Yeah, because he's not telling them what to do in uncertain terms. No uncertain terms.
Oh, I can tell you in uncertain terms what to do.
Yeah, I do that all the time. But, they want to be told what to do. This is right. It's right there on page 27 of the Bible. It says so, and my preacher told me, and there's no other way, and I'm not interested in anything you say because anything you have to say is fake news. Fine, okay. I get 35% of the population is going to be in that situation, although there was an article I came across the other day that I included in the Pundit Roundup about how the evangelical community is really fracturing over Trump support. Because some people are waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe this wasn't a good idea. I'll see if I can round that up.
Yeah, that'll help answer the question, how long, maybe. How long does it take, or when are they going to wake up to it?
It centers around Beth Moore and her leaving the... Her, I guess, the Baptist conference.
Yeah, well, I wonder whether that's triggered by... I mean, she was independent.
Because she says, I can't support this guy.
Yeah, but I guess it was probably helped along by losing. I think she was on her way out
Losing was
the
an
door
enormous thing to happen,
losing.
which is still only now sinking into a lot of people.
Yes, there are many who deny it, of course.
Right, so, you have this delayed response because some people didn't even accept it in the first place.
Yes. All right, yeah, I did see that story, and I know I read it, but I think I might have been one of those things I read to myself when I'm not on the air.
Right, exactly.
So it doesn't count.
Anyway, getting back to Tim Caulfield.
Yes.
People may want to hear about uncertainty, but will communicating it do more harm than good? Will it just add to an already confused information environment? The data on this point are fairly mixed, but recent research exploring the impact of communicating scientific uncertainty found it either increased perceptions of trust or had no impact. That's good news. Mm-hmm. And the author of one of the studies notes this should allow academics and science communicators to be more transparent about the limits of human knowledge. And other studies have found that being honest about uncertainties in media reports about research can actually boost the perceived credibility of journalists. And over the long term, honesty about the uncertainties of the evidence seems essential to the maintenance of public trust. Longtime listeners will know that that's a theme and a mantra that I've been banging on for about a year now. For example, being overly dogmatic about a policy or predictive model could hurt the credibility of decision makers if new evidence requires a revision of a past position. Why, that's like saying that a poll says this and then a month later the poll changed. But you said a month ago. Well, that's because people's opinion changes. To be fair, it's not a simple dance. Public health authorities need to communicate in a manner that's clear, concise, and when possible consistent, but they also need to be transparent so what should be done. When possible, public health authorities or anybody seeking to communicate science, that includes governors, including governors in red states, should start with well-defined and well-supported takeaway messages, but then be honest about what's not known. And, again, that's the Tony Fauci. We don't know that, but here's what we do know. Okay. That is just an excellent way to say things. Depending upon the medium used, social media posts may not be the best venue. It may also be wise to explain the limits of the research approach. When communicating about uncertainty, it's also important to highlight what's being done to reduce it. For the public, try not to let the uncertainty kerfuffle distract you from the big picture, which is Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss.
Right.
No, I just threw that in. Remember that there are many clear knowns. Vaccines, physical distancing, hand washing, masks, and being responsible when symptoms emerge will get us through the pandemic. And finally, it's also important to take a break from all the uncertainty. Studies have shown that the constant consumption of conflicting COVID news can add to the stress. Put down the phone, back away from the screen, and take 10. So we don't because we
only allow ourselves 2 and then 1. And
I'm only on the show 3 times a week, so yes. I follow my own advice there.
Okay. Yeah, well, you got more.
You got a problem.
10.
You're on 5 days a week.
Yeah. Well, I refuse to acknowledge it as a problem. I mean, right. I'm there. I can see that. Okay. Well, that is confusing. A little bit, but
well, the main message
Canada
is that people should be honest, and if it's complex, say it's complex. If you don't know, say you don't know. Admit when you were wrong.
No, don't do that.
And that's why it's so important. I found at least one piece here
that is interesting
about Beth Moore, March 11, 2021, from the New York Times. With humor and biblical authority, Beth Moore captivates evangelical women. The author and public speaker attracted attention for her dramatic break with the Southern Baptist Convention this week. Will it make any difference in the long run? Well, that remains to be seen. We're uncertain about that.
Right, but we know we don't know that, or something like that. And then it occurs to me that all of the advice given in the Globe and Mail, it was Globe and Mail, wasn't it?
Yes.
The piece is the exact opposite of Trumpism. If there's any political advice that underlies Trumpism, well, certainly the last part about never admit when you're wrong, just pretend you were right the whole way through. And that, I guess, so the counterweight to that is 30% of the public will always throw their lot in with the people who never admit they're wrong.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. So then the rest of the question is
whether
the dogs will. Hello?
You want to be on the show?
Certainly. Come on in and give us your opinion on the AstraZeneca vaccine for dogs. Do they have any sort of veterinary use for this? Probably not. They're not getting it. Okay. I do have something else on the Beth Moore story, so I can kind of launch into that and explain the background of that. Now I remember where I saw it, which was, I might as well just throw that out here. I opened it up. I found it somewhere. There it is. The tweet from Franklin Leonard, with whom I am not familiar, but asking the question, well, I guess we need the background story. I mean, the very basic background story is Beth Moore is a a Bible lady who was very popular among the Southern Baptists for all the reasons that most Southern Baptists get excited about Bible ladies. And she decided to make a break with this church, and we'll explain why. But Franklin Leonard had the line that interested me in this thing. Who will be the first noble warrior against cancel culture to demand that the church she broke with, Lifeway Church, continue to publish her books, a Dr. Seuss angle, if you will, on this story. So that made me interested in it, and I picked it up from there, and I can share it perhaps after the next break, unless Abby wants to read it to us.
Well, I did find the story
okay.
I had in mind here. This is from TNR. The post-Trump crack-up of the evangelical community, its embrace of an ignominious president is forcing a long overdue reckoning with the movement's embrace of white supremacy and illiberal politics.
Yeah, Beth hasn't said much about that one.
Right. So in 2017, beloved Bible teacher and evangelical personality Beth Moore had the chance to meet a theologian she'd long admired. As she later recounted on her blog, she was eager to share a meal with the iconic figure left unnamed in her recounting and talk about Scripture. That encounter proved to be memorable, not for the reasons that Moore, often called the Southern Belle, imagined. The theologian, within an instant of meeting her, scanned her up and down, smiled approvingly, and remarked she was better looking than another well-known woman Bible teacher. It wasn't the first time Moore had been degraded for merely being a woman, and it wouldn't be the last. As early as the 1980s, when she began to share devotionals with other women in her aerobics class, she was met with contempt by many men in the Southern Baptist Convention. By tradition, women were not to have leadership roles. They were to sit cheerily at the feet of men, even though she took care to call herself a Bible teacher rather than a preacher, and even though she diligently wore flats so as not to emasculate men of shorter stature. Moore was regularly dismissed and ridiculed. Nonetheless, became an influential force, and so that's why it was a big deal.
She's done everything she's supposed to do, and it worked for quite a while. She was very popular.
Right.
And,
there's a new generation of religious scholars doing corrective history. Anthea Butler wrote her forthcoming book, White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America, which, by the way, I have on order and should arrive this week, to redress what she calls the white savior approach to evangelical history, the tendency of media-savvy religious leaders and insider academics to illuminate the noble efforts of abolitionists and other do-gooders while giving little or no thought to evangelicalism's more incendiary projects. Her book discusses how 19th century missionaries used the gospel to control heathen, which is to say non-white others, how the SBC was founded in 1845 to protect the interests of Southern slaveholders from the influence of and interference of Northern Baptists, and how Southern evangelicals valorized white femininity in order to both justify the abuse of supposedly barbarous black men and obscure their own sexual violence against enslaved women.
Can I have
interesting
this book
approach,
when you're done?
And so I'm looking forward to that book, and maybe we'll talk about
yes, I think I'd like to have that one when you're done, or maybe I've got a new kick now of trying audio books because.
Very good.
Well,
I'm right now just starting Ralph Warnock's book, Senator Reverend Ralph Warnock, as he refers to himself,
thank you very much.
about the splits in the black church and the whole idea of what is its purpose in the face of white supremacy. What are you supposed to be doing, and do you have a voice, and how do you supposed to use that voice and still be true to the Gospels? So I'm starting that one, and then I'm going to read Anthea Butler's, and I think they're going to be great bookends. And, why am I doing this? Because I don't know enough about this. And even at my age, I figure it's good to learn.
Yeah, I don't have any questions about why you're doing it. So fine by me. It's, fascinating subject. And that we've touched on so many of the parts of what she's apparently going to address in this book that it makes sense to me. I will have to, after I very quickly fill out a bracket between the show and tip-off, perhaps I can find a copy or access to a copy at some point and plan it for later.
I have to make my annual confession. I don't do brackets. I only follow the Yukon women.
Yeah, well, they
win until they lose or don't, and that's the end of it.
They usually make it exciting for a long time.
They usually make it to the finals, so it's usually interesting.
It's a good pick. I usually do fill out a bracket, and I don't know anything about what I'm doing, but I agonize over it. And now I realized, oh my God, it's today, and I haven't done it. And so today I think it'll be my experiment in, are my picks made in 10 minutes or less as good or better than the ones I actually try to figure out what I'm doing? And I think the answer will be yes. And if if the answer is enough yeses, I guess I win. Well, I won't tell anybody at the IRS what happens. We all share in non-monetary camaraderie afterwards. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the story. See you next week sometime, because you got to take a break from this every once in a while, except if you're David Waldman, who has a show Monday through Friday. And I try to help out and give him at least a little bit of a break during the week.
Yes.
And why? Because I like talking to David, and we've been talking for, 15 some odd years now. And, it's I miss it when I don't talk to him, and the pandemic isn't going to stop us, and neither is distance. So I call in and say hi.
Skype.
Do I have to? No, I don't really have to, but I want to. Why? Because I like it. Now,
there you go.
We make you listen. That's your problem.
You have an option. I recommend you not exercise it.
But if you're still listening and it's 10 o'clock, it's too late for the first hour. You're already sucked in. So I'll be back on Monday. We'll do it again, and with less chaos. It's always interesting to see if we can come up with some themed discussions for the show. But, we managed this week.
Yeah.
Somehow or other, I don't mind that Biden's not giving press conferences. Even with a President Biden, we're still finding stuff to talk about. And frankly, it's a lot more interesting than the stuff we used to talk about.
Yeah, right. True. And it has to do with policy and substance and making people's lives better instead of driving us crazy and making things worse. I'm getting very used to and spoiled by the idea that I can pay attention to sometimes other things.
Isn't it nice to wake up and say,
sense.
What good policy are they passing this week?
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot better, and nothing has been better than having Trump off Twitter. Huge mistake not to do it earlier. Huge mistake to wonder whether it would have been better leaving him there or considering letting him back in the door. Okay. Well, speaking of breaks, you get a break 2 days a week. I get them for 1 or 2 minutes at a time.
That's equal.
Yeah, it's coming up next. I don't know. I took this job. This is my idea. So I'm stuck with it. Thanks, Greg. We'll check in with you again next week when we start passing important policies again. We stopped doing that now because it's weekend in Congress. Thursday. You know how that goes. And all right, have a good weekend. Say hi to Abby and do some laundry. We'll see you Monday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay. By the way, an answer to the question about whether or not they need any veterinary COVID-19 vaccines. Well, not an answer directly on that, but in a related question, Ricky has an answer for us. Cats apparently more susceptible to COVID-19 than dogs. Is that right? I remember hearing early on that domestic pets mostly were not getting it. And I guess I hope that's still the case. But I guess cats were getting it more than dogs. So, I don't know. I don't think the cats are going to sit still for any vaccines, especially not twice. Nobody will. But humans can be trained to do so. All right, back. I guess we could double back to that story because there really is something there, and I am intrigued by this, the premise of this book in explaining the emergence of the Southern Baptist Convention and what they're all about. I always wondered about that. Just sort of, I just had this vague notion of, well, they're extraordinarily conservative and annoying people, politically speaking. But what would make a church in the United States differentiate between the way they approached religion based on which region of the United States they were based in? And I thought that was, I guess the only answer could be those posited in the book. But I look forward to learning a little bit more about the background of that. As I mentioned, Beth Moore came on my radar this past weekend, perhaps, because of this tweet that I saw. I don't know anything about Beth Moore, but there was an article attached to Franklin Leonard's tweet about it, which really caught my eye because of the reference to the Dr. Seuss thing. So I read up on what is this all about. And the article attached to it is a Washington Post piece, which is a little bit more focused on the mechanics of the break between Beth Moore, who I knew nothing about, and the Southern Baptist Convention. Bible teacher Beth Moore, and we learned about why she calls herself that, Trump critic and advocate for sexual abuse victims, splits with Southern Baptist Convention, because I guess you can't be a Southern Baptist and a critic of, one, Donald Trump, or two, sexual abuse, because apparently, according to the book, the Southern Baptist Convention was founded in an effort to protect certain kinds of sexual abuse. How fantastic is that? What a peculiar institution they were into down there in the South in those days. This piece from March 9th, this is the Washington Post piece on this break and what it's all about, is by Bob Smietana. I'm guessing at the pronunciation of Smietana, and hope I got it right. And it's datelined down in Nashville. For nearly 3 decades, Beth Moore has been the very model of a modern Southern Baptist. Get it? All right. A little bit of Gilbert and Sullivan reference in the beginning of the headline. It has nothing to do with anything, but they wanted to use it. She loves Jesus, and that's going to be big among the Southern Baptists, and the Bible, also very important for them, and has dedicated her life to teaching others why they need both of them in their lives. Okay, standard fare so far, right? Millions of evangelical Christian women have read her Bible studies and flocked to hear her speak at stadium-style events where Moore delves deeply into biblical passages. Moore's outsized influence and role in teaching the Bible has always made some evangelical power brokers uneasy because of their belief only men should be allowed to preach. And she actually complies, in a sense, with that by saying, well, I'm not preaching, I'm just doing Bible study, teaching, that's all. I don't really know how I would differentiate between the two things, but if it's important to you that I not call myself a preacher, then that's fine. And she goes so far as to, as Greg mentioned, always wear flats so that she's never taller than any of these short male preachers who might be offended that God made them so short or whatever. I don't know what they would be offended by that, but these are Southern Baptist preachers you're talking about. And I don't think we're on the same wavelength with them in terms of what's offensive and what's not. So, okay, taking them at their word, she's looking not to offend them. I just want to talk about the Bible. All right, fine. So where were we here? Yes, Moore, though, was above reproach, supporting Southern Baptist teachings that limits the office of pastor to men alone, and cheerleading for the missions and evangelistic work that the denomination holds dear. She has been a stalwart for the Word of God, never compromising. Former Lifeway Christian Resources, that's an interesting name for their, I guess, corporation, though it is also a church, Lifeway Christian Resources, President Tom Rayner said in 2015 during a celebration at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center in Nashville that honored 20 years of partnership between the Southern Baptist Publishing House, that's what they are, Lifeway Christian Resources, a publishing house. I guess it's I don't know whether they were, I guess at tax time they'll tell you, we're a church, you can't tax us. And any other time they're like, yeah, we sell books. Want to buy some? All right, who knows? Anyway, this is so honoring the 20 years of partnership between the Southern Baptist Publishing House, Lifeway Christian Resources, and Beth Moore. In other words, they published her books. And when all is said and done, the impact of Beth Moore can only be measured in eternity's grasp. I'm not even certain what that means, but that's lingo that probably means something special to them and sounds weird to everybody else. But basically they were publishing her books and they were happy because they were making money and it wasn't anti-Baptist in its approach. So there you go. Then along came Donald Trump. And as you know, everything Trump touches dies. And so now this relationship between Moore and Lifeway has to die too. Moore's criticism of the 45th president's abusive behavior towards women and her advocacy for sexual abuse victims turned her from a beloved icon to a pariah in the denomination she loved all her life. So yes, you're processing this correctly. I know you can't hardly believe it, but what happened here is an evangelical woman said from an evangelical viewpoint that it is wrong for the President of the United States to be abusive toward women. Presumably, she says it, or comes to the realization largely because she's a woman and may have had some of these experiences or talked to people who have. Though, you would hope that you could come to this conclusion independent of that, but I'm sure she would have. But she didn't have that opportunity. She's a woman. She comes to it from that perspective. But she's also a Southern Baptist evangelical, and she actually comes to the conclusion that, well, if we are good Christians, that we should be against the abuse of the powerless by the powerful. And, like you would say, sure, of course, good, it's about time. Thank God, I guess literally, that you've kind of come to this position and stated it. Whereas, apparently, the Southern Baptist Convention said, oh, wait a second, you mistake the reason for our Christianity. You forget, as others point out in their books, and I want to make sure I have the right one in mind here. Now, I'll have to go back and listen and make sure I've got the right title and author and everything and go and pick up the right book. But if you've founded your Southern Baptist Convention on the premise that, well, abuse of some people is actually a great idea when we perpetrate it, well, then, okay, you're going to run into problems with them. But she, I guess, had put aside or forgotten at some point what the foundations of the movement were and just listened to what they said and the attractive message that they propagate about themselves to others and listened to that. And I guess that was her big mistake. So there you go. Moore's criticism of Trump's abusive behavior toward women made her from beloved icon to pariah in this denomination. Wake up, sleepers, she said, to what women have dealt with all along in environments of gross entitlement and power. Like, she's right. Moore once wrote about Trump, riffing on a passage from the New Testament book of Ephesians. Because of her opposition to Trump and her outspokenness in confronting sexism and nationalism in the evangelical world, which seems like a natural target, Moore has been labeled as liberal and even, woke, and even as being a heretic for daring to give a message during a Sunday morning church service, which, is kind of like when Bible teachers ought to be given their messages. I'm not really sure what makes a heretic, but I guess if you do it during a Sunday morning church service, well, you're trying to be a pastor, and that's bad, and therefore you're a heretic. Finally, Moore had had enough. And you would think that would have happened earlier, but it didn't. She told Religion News Service in an interview Friday, and remember, this is dated March 9th, so I guess it was like, the previous 2 Fridays ago, in an interview on Friday, that she is, quote, no longer a Southern Baptist. She just absolutely up and left the denomination. So that's kind of amazing. I guess they kind of forced her out of it. But it did happen. It just happens to coincide with, also Trump lost. And so maybe now it's, I don't know whether that's the church saying now we don't care, you get out of here, or her saying now there's no point in trying to hang on to this alliance, or whether it had nothing whatsoever to do with it, or maybe it did have something to do with it. And see, he lost, and for all of you evangelicals who were sure God was going to make sure he won because he's a righteous guy and I'm wrong about him, he lost. Maybe God did make sure of the thing he was supposed to. All right, fine. Just blow up the whole progressive thing all at once. But okay, that God had, why am I even talking in these terms at all? But God had arranged for Trump to lose, and I was right and you were wrong, and you should leave me. But maybe this is the time where we make this break. So here's the deal. She says, I am still a Baptist, but I can no longer identify with Southern Baptists, which makes for an interesting realignment. The sort of thing that comes up in discussions whenever conservatives say dumb things like, oh yeah, well, the original segregationists and slavery proponents were Democrats. Well, sometimes people realign. And then eventually, that's usually pushed back on by saying, well, where do Southern Democrat bigots go when it's too uncomfortable for them to remain in a Democratic Party? There's your answer about, what the modern reality is. They become Republicans. What happens to Southern Baptists who can no longer abide by the excuses made for abuses like those perpetrated by Trump and others against women and others? And the answer is they stay Baptists, they just aren't Southern anymore. There you go. So, still a Baptist, but I can no longer identify with Southern Baptists, Moore said in a phone interview. I love so many Southern Baptist people, so many Southern Baptist churches, but I don't identify with some of the things in our heritage that haven't remained in the past. I'm not sure I could decode that entirely. Moore told RNS, that was Religious News Service, that she recently ended her longtime publishing partnership with Nashville-based Lifeway Christian. While Lifeway Christian will still distribute her books, it will no longer publish them or administer her live events. And a full disclosure is offered here in parentheses. The author of this article is a former Lifeway employee. So if that explains anything for you, or at least tells you a little bit about who the writer is, because I had never, I don't think, seen the name on any of these, on any Washington Post articles before. But, okay, so there you go. But that's the link back to the Dr. Seuss thing. Lifeway is essentially like the Dr. Seuss foundation, making decisions about what they will and won't publish going forward. But they'll still take the money for the ones they already printed. Kate Bowler, or Bowler, I'm not sure, Bowler, a historian at Duke Divinity School. There's a basketball tie for you, probably, right? I mean, Duke's always in it, aren't they? Who has studied evangelical women celebrities, said Moore's departure is a significant loss for the Southern Baptist Convention. Moore, she said, is one of the denomination's few standalone women leaders whose platform was based on her own charisma, leadership, and incredible work ethic, and not her marriage to a famed pastor. Moore's husband, in case you were wondering, is actually a plumber by trade, it says here. She also appealed to a wide audience outside her denomination. That would be important, I think. Ms. Moore is a deeply trusted voice across the liberal-conservative divide. Yeah, I mean, maybe. She's certainly she's the only Bible teacher I've been doing any reading about. And has always been able to communicate a deep faithfulness to her tradition without having to follow the Southern Baptists' scramble to make Trump spiritually respectable, Bowler said. The Southern Baptists have lost a powerful champion in a time in which their public witness has already been significantly weakened. There's that evangelical lingo again. Moore may be one of the most unlikely celebrity Bible teachers in recent memory. I think the fact that there are celebrity Bible teachers is unlikely all by itself. In the 1980s, she began sharing devotionals during the aerobics class, Greg mentioned that she taught at First Baptist Church in Houston. That must have been really interesting during huffing and puffing to be sharing devotionals. She then began teaching a popular women's Bible study at the church, which eventually attracted thousands each week. In the early 1990s, she wrote a Bible study manuscript and sent it to Lifeway, then known as the Baptist Sunday School Board, where it was rejected. Ew, women. Right? I don't know why they rejected it. However, after a Lifeway staffer saw Moore teach a class in person, the publisher changed its mind. Moore's first study, A Woman's Heart, God's Dwelling Place. I mean, I guess it's good I read this part. Like, don't fool yourself about who this person is, but she's better than most of them, but okay. Anyway, published in 1995, it was a hit, leading to dozens of additional studies, all backed up by hundreds of hours of research and reflecting Moore's relentless desire to know more about the Bible. I don't know, how much more are we going to uncover about this situation? I don't know. It's kind of fascinating just to sort of think about where she stands in relation to the entire Southern Baptist Convention. However, because it's so interesting and detailed, it will likely eat up the entirety of the rest of the show to read all this. So I don't know. I'll recommend it to you and put it in the roundup. It sounds kind of fascinating. But yes, do keep in mind all along, you're still talking about an evangelical, conservative Christian woman here. And good for her for standing up for these principles in particular. Because I have been wondering, why do they seem to be missing from the Christian evangelical worldview when you'd think it would be central. So there you go. Okay. Very good news. All right. Oh, look at this. By the way, here's some news. Mimi Joe has chimed in. Tweet says, I have to make sure I get the actual Twitter handle correct here. World awaited, right? It was World AW number 8, await ED. So following along, Mimi Joe, it's easier to just say Mimi Joe, says she's LOLing now, and it's her duty to tell you that the Dukies, she puts it, are not on your bracket anywhere. So that's pretty amazing. I guess that's something COVID changed for all of us, and thank God, because I don't know whether I'm not a genuine enough basketball fan to worry about being a Duke fan or a non-Duke fan. It's just one of those things that I recall from years of participating in the brackets only. Like, there's this vehement Duke hatred out there, and I was pretty sure that you could basically say that for all of my adult lifetime dealing with the brackets, Duke was always there. So, I don't know. I guess they're not. Is that good? I guess so. It certainly gives the people who are Duke haters something to celebrate. And Mimi Cho too, I guess. All right, thanks. Good. That solves a problem, because they always, not only were they always there, they were always pretty highly seeded, and you had to, wrestle with, one, do you believe that they'll go far into the tournament? And it was always a good bet that they would, but I had so many Duke haters in my various pools that you had to watch out for picking them to go out early, because you wouldn't necessarily be alone there. And if you did the thing that you didn't want to do and pick Duke to go deep, and then they did, you would pick up points against people who hated them and therefore tried to eliminate them early. So now my strategy is out the window, and I'll have to be doing coin tosses, which is probably just as good as anything else, except I don't know if I have enough time to toss the coins that many times. I'm going to have to just pick out like 32 coins and toss them all for the first round, and then put them in order and say, you. Okay. I wonder how that would work out. Anyway, let's see. Let's turn back to actual news and see what's up here in terms of stories that I have socked away, and there are several. Something I picked up this morning, which I thought might be of some interest, though I didn't get a chance to preview the article. Might have been interesting to see what Politico had to say about this under the headline, Politico's Playbook, what Ron Klain told progressives behind closed doors. And that will be of interest, I think, to a lot of people. We'll see what's the relationship like, and are people willing to admit that this is what happened behind closed doors. Rachel Bade, Ryan Lizza, Tara Palmieri, and Eugene Daniels, all combining for bylines in this one. Typical Politico style here. Scoop. White House considering breaking up Build Back Better. Let's find out what that is all about. Leaders of the Congressional Progressive Caucus met with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain at the White House on Wednesday morning. We caught up with CPC Chair Pramila Jayapal of Washington on Wednesday night, and here's what she told us. I'm curious to see what the relationship is going to be between the caucus and the White House. Especially, I guess here I'll read you the caption that they put underneath the photo of Jayapal illustrating the piece here. This is what made it of interest to me. A few years ago, the Congressional Progressive Caucus was viewed as a bunch of radicals with no clout. Now they're flexing and commanding the attention of the White House. So I'd like to find out what this relationship is going to be like, if we can depend on this sort of reporting to actually tell us. On Build Back Better, we hear this. Progressives pressed for a commitment that Joe Biden's jobs plan will address not only transportation infrastructure, but climate change, healthcare, and so-called family infrastructure, things like childcare and paid leave. Jayapal laid out concerns that those things won't be possible unless Democrats go to the 51-vote reconciliation route. or perhaps eliminating the filibuster, as opposed to trying to cut a deal with Republicans. We can either go green or we can go bipartisan, because I just don't think that Republicans are ready to have a transformative package. And so I said that at the White House, Jayapal said, and that's about what I would expect to hear from this side. What about from the other side? Klein did not say what the plan was, oh boy, but he indicated to the CPC leaders that the White House is exploring different options, including the possibility of breaking up the jobs package into as many as 3 bills, according to Jayapal. Some could garner bipartisan support, and some could be done through reconciliation. I think they share that commitment to addressing climate in this infrastructure package, Jayapal said. Maybe that's part of the reason they were saying there may be multiple bills. In theory, there'd be at least a handful of Republicans who would back a narrower package to pay for new roads and bridges because they think the country needs it and their constituents want it, but not want to go any further than that. The question is whether the GOP would be willing to cut a deal knowing that another $1 trillion bill could be next. Next up, number 2 here, taxing the rich. Progressives laid out their thinking about how the Build Back Better plan should be used to redistribute wealth. Klein, according to Jayapal, seemed to agree. We did have a very good discussion about how the White House sees any revenue raisers, and I think we share their perspective that revenue raisers are really about making the tax code fair, Jayapal said. And of course, addressing the massive and unprecedented income inequality in this country, that's very much our frame as well. Number 3, return of the minimum wage debate. Progressives pressed Klein to commit to making the $15 minimum wage happen somehow, some way, and left feeling like he agrees it needs to be a priority. This is not real super solid stuff, but it's nice to have agreement, even if it doesn't lead to anything. Progressives brought up nuking the filibuster to get it done. Another idea floated in the room, attaching a wage increase to must-pass legislation. The second idea could be risky. If Democrats added the wage hike to government funding, for example, it could cause a showdown with the GOP over a potential government shutdown. There was no consensus around it, but I will just say we got a very clear sense that this is a real commitment for the White House, and they're very willing to work with us on what that looks like, Jayapal said. Number 4, immigration. Klein also indicated that Biden would soon increase the cap on the number of refugees that would be admitted to the U.S., something Biden promised to do in early February but has yet to follow through on. More broadly, the CPC leader said Klein agreed that more needs to be done to address the crisis. That's our word, the author's note, not his, at the border. The White House, Jayapal said, is hindered by the Trump administration's move to dismantle immigration facilities and infrastructure at the border, but they're working to get that fixed. They want to speed that up. They want more quickly work on a solution, and we all understood the importance of that. We should pause for a second, the writers say, to reflect on the power of the CPC right now. A few years ago, the group was viewed as a bunch of radicals with no clout. They're now flexing and commanding the attention of the White House. Biden called Jayapal after the American Rescue Plan passed, and she told him she wants these kinds of meetings to happen regularly. Well, sure, everybody does. Now CPC has not 1 but 2 meetings at the White House in the span of just a few days. Another is expected by the end of the week, which I guess is coming because it's Thursday. In addition to Jayapal, the members who attended the Klein meeting were Representatives Ilhan Omar, Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, Barbara Lee of California, Cori Bush as well from Missouri, per 2 sources. Klein did not respond to a request for comment, so he's not giving away names himself. And that wraps up this piece. They move on to the rest of their roundup, but that's pretty good. Okay. I mean, not like there were solid commitments from the White House to, every single agenda item that progressives have proposed, along with a plan for finding a way to passage in the Senate. But it's good that the discussion is going on, and it's good that the theme of the article is that the way the new Democratic White House is thinking of congressional progressives is a significant advancement from the way, at the very least, from the way outlets like Politico reported at the time that the Obama White House regarded the Congressional Progressive Caucus and its membership. So that's good news. We'll take what we can from this one and then move into our final segment for the day, the race towards the pain of having to fill out a bracket and recognizing that I'm not going to be able to put any sort of analysis into it, and that always worries me a little bit. But if we just imagine we're going to lose the bet from the outset, I guess it's not so bad. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Why don't we return to our favorite theme of the question of filibuster reform and how things are moving on this front for our last segment, because there's stuff to catch up on. And we'll let you know that I guess tomorrow's last segment, the plan is there's actual plan in place to do the same. This time catching up with, as we've been threatening all week, catching up with Eli Zupnik and figuring out what's going on institutionally speaking from the Fix the Senate campaign on that side. I'd like to know what they make of the various proposals and the chances and the mechanics by which they're hearing people discussing they might be able to implement these things. So we'll start off with the mechanics, just by way of warning, and pick up on Sarah Binder's latest for the Monkey Cage blog over at the Washington Post, and talk about some of the mechanics of getting these things done. And then perhaps we can roll into what we didn't get to yesterday, segments 3 and 4 from Liberal Thinking, Rich's latest contributions to the show, pre-recorded segments discussing his big filibuster piece over at Daily Kos. But we'll start with Binder here. Biden says, bring back the talking filibuster. We all saw that headline, of course. Would that really let Senate Democrats pass bills? The details, as you might imagine, are devilish. It's not necessarily the cure-all that everybody wants to believe or has been interested for whatever reason in believing. I mean, it does. Remember, this is offered up as something of a halfway compromise between the people like Manchin, who are reluctant to get rid of the filibuster, and those who want to see it abolished. At least make it painful and physically demanding for people, in particular the minority. The demands for the work to maintain a filibuster should fall on the minority that insists they want extended debate, not on the majority who want to get to a vote. They shouldn't be the ones working 24/7 to get around to the vote. Although I suppose you could spin it that way too. Anyway, but it does deserve a serious look. Okay, well, what would happen if you did demand some form of talking filibuster? Would it work every time? Is it any kind of a guarantee? And I have a feeling Sarah will say not necessarily. President Biden and the Democrats are increasingly frustrated with the Senate filibuster, obviously. Good start. The Senate's cloture rule requires, as you know, 60 votes to, 3/5 of those, duly chosen and sworn, but that's 60 votes to cut off debate and bring the matter to a vote. Since there are only 50 Democratic senators, Democrats need the votes of 10 Republicans each time Democrats want to vote on a bill on their agenda, and Democrats are skeptical that will happen. Despite their frustrations, Democrats don't all agree about whether to abolish the filibuster, much less how to change it. Not every Democrat is on board with deploying what's called the nuclear option. a procedural move by which a simple majority of the Senate could end debate and move to a vote on changing a rule. Okay. Still, support for reining in the filibuster is growing. Even Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, one of the Democrats' most fervent filibuster defenders, has endorsed restoring the talking filibuster. Here's what you need to know, oh boy, about the talking filibuster and why restoring it might not be the magic elixir advocates suggest. And we don't suggest the magic in this show. Today's senators kill measures with a silent filibuster. Is section 1 here. The 1939 Hollywood classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington made the talking filibuster famous, and that was the only kind that was really available to them at the time. In the film's iconic image, Jimmy Stewart as Senator Smith pours his heart into a near marathon performance on the Senate floor to expose corruption in a pending bill. In this approach, the winning team is the one with the greater resolve. Either the opposition gives up its attack on a bill and yields the floor, thus allowing a majority to advance a vote, or the minority's resolve to keep blocking a vote convinces the majority to pull the measure and move on to other Senate business. But senators decades ago replaced the talking filibuster with silent ones. Instead of forcing senators to talk interminably to block a measure, Senate leaders today lean on the chamber's cloture rule. When the majority leader cannot get unanimous consent of all 100 senators to proceed to a vote, the leader files a cloture motion on the pending matter. The cloture rule requires 60 votes to end debate. To beat this silent filibuster, the majority party must round up 60 votes. No longer must the minority talk a measure to death. Filibustering senators just have to prevent the majority from securing 60 votes for cloture. And, again, the appearance of when the majority leader can't get unanimous consent for all 100 senators to proceed to a vote, well, you could always, of course, make a motion to proceed to consideration of that vote or a motion. But I guess while you're in the middle of debating the bill itself, once you've moved on from the motion to proceed, then I guess you're stuck if you can't get unanimous consent to call the question. Anyway, next up, creating the silent filibuster was a bipartisan affair. Both parties were complicit in creating the silent filibuster. In a far less partisan Senate than today's, the 1970s Senate often found itself tied in knots when contentious measures came to the floor. Majority Leader Mike Mansfield of Montana in 1970 suggested that the Senate invent a second shift or track of legislation. And I had thought that was Robert Byrd's idea. Maybe it was his idea and proposed on the floor by Mansfield, though. Byrd at that point was probably majority whip. Anyway, when a filibuster blocked the first track, Mansfield simply asked unanimous consent of all 100 senators to set aside the filibustered measure and move on to a new bill on a different track. Mansfield's change did not require the Senate to make a formal change in its rules. All he really did was ask for consent to start tracking. And you never have to change the rules if you can get unanimous consent on something. Party leaders on both sides of the aisle thought tracking would help them make the floor schedule more predictable. But tracking also made it easier for senators to filibuster. Even threats to filibuster could be sufficient to move the Senate onto the second track. As the Senate became more partisan, while blocking bills required so little effort, leaders filed an exponentially increasing number of cloture motions, routinizing, I don't know how you would pronounce that word actually, but making routine, we'll say, of the silent filibuster. Next up, devilish details. Senators are pitching ideas to bring back the talking filibuster. Senator Richard Durbin this past week said it was time to stop letting senators phone it in. Under Durbin's proposal, a senator who wants to block a bill should speak on the floor and refuse to yield. This would probably not require any changes in the rules. Senator Jeff Merkley's more detailed proposal would require changing Senate rules. He suggests that if a Senate majority, but not 60, voted for cloture, a period of extended debate would ensue. The filibuster would continue so long as a single senator is on the floor debating, but if they were to give up, the presiding officer would declare the debate over, bringing the majority leader to move on to invoking cloture by simple majority vote. The dilemma for reformers is that these sorts of changes would not necessarily shift the burden to the minority. First, filibustering senators might enjoy the limelight and use it to rally supporters, raise money, and advertise themselves. Second, a filibustering senator, say at 3 a.m, could note the absence of a quorum. The burden then falls on the majority to produce 51 votes to make a quorum. If they fail to round up 51 senators, the Senate must adjourn for the day. That's a win for the opposition, whose goal is to delay or block a final vote, and a loss for the majority eager to get a vote on their bill. What about requiring 41 votes to block cloture rather than 60 to overcome it? Political scientist Norm Ornstein advocates flipping the switch on the cloture vote. Under current rules, the entire burden rests on the majority to round up 60 votes for cloture, which, remember, cuts off debate. Opposing senators can miss the vote and still win, so long as there aren't 60 votes for cloture. Under Ornstein's proposal, the burden would shift to opponents by requiring them to muster 41 votes against cloture. In theory, that would turn up the heat on the minority to stay close to the floor, but over the past decade, almost every time cloture failed, the opposition did turn out more than 40 votes. Granted, majority parties would likely adjust their own tactics after changing the rules. They could file more cloture motions so as to catch opponents unaware, or to keep opposing senators on the floor to vote against cloture. But leaders rarely resort to these sorts of surprise tactics. Neither party senators really want to spend time hanging around on the floor. Today's slim Democratic majority has yet to agree on a reform path, but if Republicans obstruct the votes the way they did in Obama years by refusing to bargain and blaming the Democrats for failing to govern, Senate Democrats may indeed decide on how they want to curtail the filibuster. So anyway, the takeaway from this is to remember that, you need to game this stuff out and try and decide how difficult really would it be for Republicans to muster 40, given that they have 50. And, maybe with a smaller minority, it might be a different story. And it's always difficult, of course, to demand that elderly senators be always on hand for being called to the floor to defend their filibusters. And that might make them give up. And people will point, of course, to reconciliation and the vote-a-rama and point out, I feel like I've rolled over something and knocked over something somewhere. But, okay, never mind that. But thinking about the way the vote-a-rama worked out and how relatively quickly Republicans gave up, they had the option to just continue proposing crazy amendment after crazy amendment, but they just kind of got, tired of it, bored with it. We're at sound effect time, right?
Boring!
Right, it was boring, and they gave up. And might they not do the same with filibusters? Well, they might. But yeah, I think one of the key points that Tara brings up here is a lot of the imagined scenarios out depend on the element of surprise, calling for a vote, or calling for Republicans to produce their 41 votes at 3 a.m. without notice to anyone else. It's just, one of the things that they still just don't do to one another, and maybe with good reason. I don't know. But I guess that's one of the roadblocks to making it work, is it really requires dedicating yourself to the use of surprise tactics that they really hate. And, throughout all of the scorched earth tactics that Mitch McConnell used to obstruct things and breaking all the norms, one of the norms he maintained was, not doing things, at least very often, by surprise to the other side, because it's a surprise to his side too, and they don't like this stuff. Anyway, that reminded me of something, that thought that briefly came in and exited straight back out of my head again. Oh, yes, right. I guess Mitch McConnell's rant on the floor the other day that was going on, I think, while Joan was on the air with us, and she was just noting the fact that he was on this tirade. And once again, he's pulled out the same argument he always pulls out, that Republicans will break all the norms and grind the Senate to a halt if the Democrats go ahead and change filibuster rules, whether with the nuclear option or any other methodology. Any change was now going to bring out the big guns, and the Senate Republicans were going to ruin everything and grind the place to a halt. I just wanted to, again, note for the record that it's not only an old threat and one that they've done anyway. I've seen lots of other people pointing out how this is different in some way to denying a vote for a year on the Merrick Garland nomination. Yeah, not much different from that. And then, of course, if you add to that, well, a couple of weeks ago, we had people smash the doors of the Senate in and threaten to kill all of the Democratic leadership. Once you've done that, you've kind of played all your cards. You know what I'm saying? And we might as well. I think it would actually, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it might be helpful at some point to remind everybody that you're talking about, coming to some agreement on the rules of the way the Senate will operate as a debating society with people who, in some cases, were outright supporters of the insurrectionists who had come to murder members of Congress. And I'm really not that concerned about how miffed they are afterwards. And maybe you shouldn't be either. So do keep that in mind. All right, time now, maybe let's roll some of Rich's latest readings from his Busting the Filibuster contribution over on Daily Kos at the All Daily Kos Progressives group. Well, he'll give you the whole introduction, as you know. It's become his trademark. Let's roll that, and we'll comment along and get ready to wrap up today's show and be ready for tomorrow's further discussion on the subject.
Hello, this is Rich, also known as Liberal Thinking. I represent a strong progressive view within the Democratic Party, and you can find my article, Busting the Filibuster, on Daily Kos. One of the key claims of people like Senator Manchin, who support the filibuster, is that it encourages the parties to work together, which results in better legislation. Taking them at their word, let's think about how we could improve the filibuster so that it accomplished this goal. My first proposal, called Put Up or Shut Up, is designed to encourage the parties to reach compromise. It would change Senate rules to allow any legislation to pass with a simple majority unless a senator moved to, quote, refer it to a joint committee for settlement, unquote.
All right, let me pause here and just in case you're lost in the description of this proposal, this is entirely out of the blue. There are currently no existing procedure like this. I mean, if you've been taken by surprise by it, it's because it's just Rich saying, well, what if we did this? This is just I think, a proposal made from whole cloth here, and you would have to set up the infrastructure for it. And he describes one way of constituting such a committee here. I'll continue to roll it.
If the motion to refer is seconded, debate on the issue would be suspended and the issue referred to committee. That committee, by default, would have 3 senators from each party and be chaired by the minority party. That committee would have 1 month, by default, to bring a solution back to the floor. Their proposal would need to pass out of committee by a majority vote, meaning that at least one member of the majority party would need to vote in favor of it. Their solution would stand for an up or down vote on the Senate floor and could be passed on a simple majority. If it failed, the original bill would automatically go to a final debate with 1 hour allocated for closing arguments and a decision by a majority vote immediately following. This would directly address the issue cited by Senator Manchin, that the filibuster forces the sides to work together. The put up or shut up rule would force the sides to work together. If it is possible for the 2 parties to come up with a bill that satisfies a majority of the Senate, this process would prove it. One of the most frustrating things about the Republican Party is its refusal to propose a workable solution to any of the country's major problems. Republicans demanded repeal of the Affordable Care Act, but they were completely unable to propose a fair, affordable, and universal replacement. They have yet to propose a workable solution to climate change. They haven't proposed changes to police procedures to stop police treating communities like occupied territories. If they don't want Democrats to take action, it is their moral responsibility to propose workable alternative solutions.
All right. We'll just pause again just to say, okay. Well, I mean, I think it's well put, but I just want to throw in, Republicans, do they ever respond to being told that they have a moral responsibility to do something? No, they don't. But I don't think that Rich proposes this so much as this is the solution we need. I think this is more of a like, okay, I mean, it's as much put up or shut up in daring them to adopt this as it is in the procedure that it would put in place if they did adopt it, which would also ask them to put up or shut up. Interesting. Well named, I think. Let me roll the rest of it.
The Republican Party is not a legitimate political party.
Ouch.
They don't have the good of the country at heart. Their entire purpose is to stop the government from taking effective action on critical issues. Democrats should only work with Republicans in Congress under narrowly defined rules that will keep them from obstructing the process, at least until the Republican Party shows an interest in working for the good of our country. In my next segment, I propose a different option for fixing the filibuster, a rule to allow the Senate to effectively address critical issues. You can find out more about the put up or shut up rule in my post, Busting the Filibuster, in the All Daily Coast Progressives group. Join our group and make your own contributions. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, so that concludes segment 3. Segment 4 is queued up here, but a couple more comments on this. So this was, like I said, a little bit more left field for me. I don't think I've seen this sort of proposal, but I would love to throw it open to, I guess, the political scientists and the comparative government professors might be able to tell us whether there's any legislative body that uses anything like this. Because this was entirely new to me, and we'll go over it again here. So essentially, you're facing a vote on, the minimum wage bill, say a standalone. And at that point, the bill would basically, like any bill, would come to the floor under the assumption that it could be brought to a vote and passed by a simple majority. In other words, there's no such thing as extended debate unless any senator, and I mean, you'd assume you'd start seeing them do this on everything. We have to sort of game it out in worst case scenario. If any single senator moves to refer it to a joint committee for settlement. Now, a joint committee, in the term of art, the way they use it in Congress, is a joint committee. What's joint here is that both senators and members of the House would sit on such a committee. And I don't think he means it in that sense, but some other sort of committee, whether it's a standing committee or a special committee, there are any number of committees types that you could form in the Senate, and I suppose a special committee could be formed for this purpose. And then if the motion is seconded, and remember, I mean, I guess we're using, again, the existing terminology and rules for seconding motions in the Senate, which I forget exactly what the rule is, but it's something, some tiny percentage, but I don't know, 1/6 or some, there's a rule. And we usually don't hear about it because you usually don't have trouble getting a sufficient second, but Greg's ears are perking up because, of course, he keeps reminding people that Ted Cruz has a couple times been unable to get a sufficient second, and you only need a very few senators. And I forget what the rule is because it's just so infrequent that it comes up. But okay, you could get a sufficient second, and I'm sure you would, since this is a way to obstruct passage of a bill, and then it would be referred to a committee. Now, it does pose some serious problems in that I assume that they would just do it to every bill, and then there would be the question of who constitutes this committee? Because remember that most bills, let's say again our example of the minimum wage bill, has come to the floor because a committee has already considered it thoroughly, and I imagine that senators would be incensed at the idea that their carefully crafted legislation would be brought to another committee not under their jurisdiction. The chair of the committee of jurisdiction might insist on being on this special joint committee for settlement. And then, of course, there's the question of, all right, well, the rule says that this new committee would have 1 month to work out a solution, And if they couldn't work out a solution and report it out back to the floor, then the original bill comes back with 1 hour of concluding debate and there's a vote. I mean, it's very draconian, and it would work, I guess, with that backstop. But now the question is, do you get a majority of even the Democratic caucus to back such a thing? I think their big concerns would be about, well, who's in this committee? And how do we determine that? And is it a standing committee that remains the same, or do we adopt some norms for who's going to be brought into that committee and the fact that it's evenly divided? But I don't know if they would accept the idea of it being chaired by the minority, but that's supposed to address Manchin's insistence that he's only about maintaining a voice for the minority. But I guess if they were equally represented on a committee chaired by a Democrat, they might be okay with it. I don't know. Let's see. Do we have time to roll the second piece? It's about 2.5 minutes. Let's give it a shot.
Hello, this is Rich, also known as Liberal Thinking. I represent a strong progressive view within the Democratic Party, and I recently posted Busting the Filibuster on Daily Kos. Critical issues, like fair elections, have been stymied for years by Republican obstruction in the Senate. The filibuster blocked civil rights for decades. The way to break this barrier is to change the filibuster rule and allow a majority vote on critical legislation. The Senate should adopt a new rule allowing it to label a bill as essential to address a critical issue. That is, an issue urgent and vital to the health or safety of the country. With this designation, all further debate on a bill would be curtailed and a majority vote on that bill would quickly take place. The critical issue designation would require a simple majority in the Senate to apply, but under specific guidelines. The majority would have to find that the legislation is 1. Vital, in that failing to act would foreseeably result in a significant number of deaths. 2. Vital, in that failing to act would foreseeably result in widespread and unrecoverable property damage, or 3. Vital, in that failing to act would foreseeably result in irreparable harm to the government or the security of the nation. Additionally, the Senate would have to find this issue is urgent enough that failing to act would result in one of these harms or more within the following year. For example, action on climate change fits both criteria 1 and 2. Failing to act will result in a significant number of deaths and widespread property damage. Action on healthcare fits both criteria 1 and 2. Failing to act would result in unnecessary deaths and considerable loss of property. And action on voting rights fits criteria 3 because it attacks the core of democracy. With the critical issues rule, the Senate would become functional again, taking timely action on critical national problems. This rule can be combined with the put up or shut up rule to give the majority more input into the process. But it is the minimum necessary for a functional Congress. Critical issues have been postponed indefinitely. Meanwhile, competitors like China are plotting to take over the world. Our senators need to look up from their petty squabbles and get on with it. You can find out more about the put up or shut up rule and the critical issue rule in my post, Busting the Filibuster, in the All Daily Kos Progressives group. Join our group and make your own contributions. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, and we've loved hearing from you so far. Rich, thanks very much. There's 2 more segments remaining. That one describes something, but takes it a little bit further, I think. Describes something that we've heard from more corners lately, essentially adopting a rule, whether it was narrowly tailored to being bills about civil rights or voting rights, or whatever, and it's just a straight up declaration that, okay, well, we've put together a majority, we've got the numbers to force the Senate to recognize the precedent worded this way. But now it's a question of, well, how will we word it? What sort of rule-based, what sort of basis in the rules or the precedents will we offer for the idea of exempting certain kinds of bills? And that's the unanswered question in all of this. I think I've come around to the realization that, sure, I guess if you have the votes, you can carve out an exception for vital legislation, however you want to word it. And now the question is, how will you word it? So Rich has taken a first crack at this. And, you know, my fear with this one is just essentially that Republicans, once it's in their hands, will just say, well, we'll put together a majority that simply defines whatever we want as critical legislation. Tax cuts, obviously, would become critical legislation to them, and there would be no real way to stop a determined majority from doing that. But then again, how is that different from just abolishing the filibuster? Maybe in the end, what some of these proposals might do is demonstrate to people like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema that there really is no way to bring people together in a bipartisan fashion because of the existence of the filibuster. They're just going to find workarounds to it, so you might as well just get it out of the way and end the hypocrisy right from the beginning. But a good starting point for the discussion. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, with more discussion on it, and Ellie Zupnik will join us at the end of tomorrow's program to go into the mechanics and politics of it one more time from the Senate side. Time now, though, to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as always, coming up next.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, let's see. What's he got? Let me skip down a paragraph here to this other stuff we sometimes don't get to. The chef's table. We find out in today's program, President Joe Biden marked St. Patrick's Day by recommitting the U.S. to the Good Friday Agreement with Ireland. And Sister Janice McLaughlin, a Maryknoll Sisters nun who was jailed and later deported by the white minority rulers of Rhodesia, I'm just going to continue on here, for exposing human rights abuses, has died at age 79. Can't give her short shrift. Handing things over to Justice now. We'll see you tomorrow.